What would you do if someone you trusted laid a hand on your child? The sound of shattering glass barely faded before I saw it a slap, brutal and deliberate, striking my daughter's cheek. The room fell silent as Daisy gasped, wide-eyed, looking at me for help. My mother stood there unmoved, her rage twisting into something darker. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. It was planned. And now, as the weight of years of manipulation unraveled before me, I realized this was the moment everything would change. The sharp crack of shattering glass still rang in my ears when I felt the shift in the room. My daughter was on her knees, tears streaking down her face, but before I could reach her, time seemed to slow. A voice sharp, accusing, cut through the tension, throwing blame at her for something she hadn't done. Then, without warning, a hand sliced through the air and struck her cheek with a force that silenced everyone. The slap was brutal, its sound echoing like a gunshot, leaving an angry red mark blooming against her delicate skin. My heart pounded as she gasped, wide-eyed, looking at me with silent desperation. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't just a moment of humiliation. This was deliberate, and the truth was about to unravel. My name is Lily Turner. I'm 34 years old. Most weekends, my mornings start peacefully, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the kitchen. The soft hum of my 10-year-old daughter, Daisy, as she sketches in the living room. But today, that calm was smothered beneath the weight of an invitation I could no longer ignore, my sister Violet's baby shower. I hadn't attended a family gathering in years, not since my divorce 3 years ago. That was when my mother, Rose, had made it painfully clear where her loyalties lay. Her words still haunted me. Lily doesn't deserve custody of her child. That sentence had cut deeper than any knife, and now, the thought of facing her again made my stomach twist into knots. Daisy, all bright-eyed enthusiasm, skipped into the kitchen holding a small gift box wrapped in neat, slightly crinkled paper. "Do you think Aunt Violet's baby will like this?" she asked, cradling the tiny teddy bear-shaped rattles she had picked out herself. "They're going to love it, sweetheart," I assured her, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew what awaited her. My mother's cold, unyielding gaze, the way she had always dismissed Daisy, treating her as an afterthought. Since Violet's pregnancy, Rose had become obsessed with her. Every conversation revolved around Violet's health, her cravings, her baby. Daisy and I were nothing more than shadows in the background. And yet, I couldn't let that stop us. Today wasn't about me, it was about Daisy. She deserved to celebrate her future cousin, no matter how much I dreaded stepping into that room. As we drove toward the Grand Hotel, Daisy chattered excitedly from the back seat, her voice bubbling with anticipation. I tried to focus on her joy, to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, things wouldn't be as bad as I feared. But a strange unease lingered, an unshakable feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The Grand Hotel was the epitome of elegance, polished marble floors, towering crystal chandeliers, and staff in crisp uniforms. The moment we stepped into the banquet room, the scent of vanilla and fresh-cut flowers enveloped us. Pink and gold balloons swayed from the ceiling, and across the room, a long table overflowed with pastel-wrapped presents. Above it, "Welcome Baby" shimmered in elegant gold lettering. Daisy's fingers tightened around mine as she took it all in, her eyes shining. "It's so beautiful, Mom." "It is," I murmured, but my gaze had already locked onto my mother. Rose stood across the room, her gray dress pristine, a string of pearls resting just below her collarbone. Her posture was as rigid as ever, her expression unreadable until she spotted me. Our eyes met, and in an instant, her gaze hardened. I swallowed back the instinct to turn around and leave. Instead, I straightened my spine. "Come on, Daisy, let's put the gift on the table." Violet, radiant in a pale pink maternity dress, spotted us and waved eagerly. "Lily, you made it!" She pulled me into a quick hug before turning her warmth onto Daisy, leaning down to squeeze her gently. "And you brought this lovely little lady," Daisy beamed. "I picked out a gift for the baby myself." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. But then Rose's voice sliced through the air. "Don't crowd, Violet," she snapped, her sharp gaze flicking to Daisy, as if my daughter's mere existence was an inconvenience. The moment shattered. I bit my tongue to keep from lashing out. This wasn't the time. "Daisy, sweetheart, let's go put the gift on the table." "Oh. What would you do if someone you trusted laid a hand on your child?" The sound of shattering glass barely faded before I saw it a slap, brutal and deliberate, striking my daughter's cheek. The room fell silent as Daisy gasped, wide-eyed, looking at me for help. My mother stood there unmoved, her rage twisting into something darker. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. It was planned. And now, as the weight of years of manipulation unraveled before me, I realized this was the moment everything would change. The sharp crack of shattering glass still rang in my ears when I felt the shift in the room. My daughter was on her knees, tears streaking down her face, but before I could reach her, time seemed to slow. A voice sharp, accusing, cut through the tension, throwing blame at her for something she hadn't done. Then, without warning, a hand sliced through the air and struck her cheek with a force that silenced everyone. The slap was brutal, its sound echoing like a gunshot, leaving an angry red mark blooming against her delicate skin. My heart pounded as she gasped, wide-eyed, looking at me with silent desperation. And in that instant, I knew this wasn't just a moment of humiliation. This was deliberate, and the truth was about to unravel. My name is Lily Turner. I'm 34 years old. Most weekends, my mornings start peacefully, the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the kitchen, the soft hum of my 10-year-old daughter, Daisy, as she sketches in the living room. But today, that calm was smothered beneath the weight of an invitation I could no longer ignore: my sister Violet's baby shower. I hadn't attended a family gathering in years, not since my divorce 3 years ago. That was when my mother, Rose, had made it painfully clear where her loyalties lay. Her words still haunted me. "Lily doesn't deserve custody of her child." That sentence had cut deeper than any knife, and now, the thought of facing her again made my stomach twist into knots. Daisy, all bright-eyed enthusiasm, skipped into the kitchen holding a small gift box wrapped in neat, slightly crinkled paper. "Do you think Aunt Violet's baby will like this?" she asked, cradling the tiny teddy bear-shaped rattles she had picked out herself. "They're going to love it, sweetheart," I assured her, forcing a smile. But deep down, I knew what awaited her. My mother's cold, unyielding gaze, the way she had always dismissed Daisy, treating her as an afterthought. Since Violet's pregnancy, Rose had become obsessed with her. Every conversation revolved around Violet's health, her cravings, her baby. Daisy and I were nothing more than shadows in the background. And yet, I couldn't let that stop us. Today wasn't about me, it was about Daisy. She deserved to celebrate her future cousin, no matter how much I dreaded stepping into that room. As we drove toward the Grand Hotel, Daisy chattered excitedly from the back seat, her voice bubbling with anticipation. I tried to focus on her joy, to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, things wouldn't be as bad as I feared. But a strange unease lingered, an unshakable feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The Grand Hotel was the epitome of elegance: polished marble floors, towering crystal chandeliers, and staff in crisp uniforms. The moment we stepped into the banquet room, the scent of vanilla and fresh-cut flowers enveloped us. Pink and gold balloons swayed from the ceiling, and across the room, a long table overflowed with pastel-wrapped presents. Above it, "Welcome Baby" shimmered in elegant gold lettering. Daisy's fingers tightened around mine as she took it all in, her eyes shining. "It's so beautiful, Mom." "It is," I murmured, but my gaze had already locked onto my mother. Rose stood across the room, her gray dress pristine, a string of pearls resting just below her collarbone. Her posture was as rigid as ever, her expression unreadable until she spotted me. Our eyes met, and in an instant, her gaze hardened. I swallowed back the instinct to turn around and leave. Instead, I straightened my spine. "Come on, Daisy, let's put the gift on the table." Violet, radiant in a pale pink maternity dress, spotted us and waved eagerly. "Lily, you made it!" She pulled me into a quick hug before turning her warmth onto Daisy, leaning down to squeeze her gently. "And you brought this lovely little lady," Daisy beamed. "I picked out a gift for the baby myself." For a brief moment, I allowed myself to breathe. But then Rose's voice sliced through the air. "Don't crowd, Violet," she snapped, her sharp gaze flicking to Daisy, as if my daughter's mere existence was an inconvenience. The moment shattered. I bit my tongue to keep from lashing out. This wasn't the time. "Daisy, sweetheart, let's go put the gift on the table." Oh.
My pulse pounded in my ears as I stared at the envelope, a cold sense of foreboding settling in my gut. I didn't know what was inside, but judging by the way Rose's face drained of color, the way her hands began to tremble, I knew this mattered. The pink envelope quivered in the staff member's grasp as he held it out for all to see. The murmurs in the room grew louder, curiosity sweeping through the crowd like wildfire. I instinctively tightened my grip around Daisy, shielding her as she buried her face into my chest. Where did that envelope come from? Rose's voice was sharp, but there was something else woven into it now. Fear. "Under the table," the staff member repeated, unwavering. "It's a little wet, but it looks important." I watched Rose's hand twitch, her fingers flexing as if itching to snatch the envelope away. But she hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the entrance where the hotel's security manager had just arrived. He was a tall, imposing man in a crisp black suit, his watchful eyes scanning the room with the kind of scrutiny that made people uneasy. With a silent exchange, the staff member passed the envelope to him. The manager weighed it in his hands, then carefully peeled it open. The air in the room thickened as he unfolded the contents neatly stacked papers, each page meticulously organized. But what made my breath hitch was the handwriting scrawled across the top. I knew that cursive. I had seen it on birthday cards, grocery lists, and passive-aggressive notes left on my kitchen counter years ago. "Rose's handwriting," I whispered, my blood turning ice cold. The color in Rose's face vanished entirely as the manager's eyes scanned the papers, his expression hardening with every passing second. "This appears to be a detailed set of instructions," he announced, his deep voice slicing through the thick silence. "It outlines specific actions for today, coordination with staff, strategic placement of Daisy, and explicit directions ensuring a disturbance during the baby shower." A stunned gasp rippled through the room. Violet's hand shot up to her mouth, her eyes brimming with unshed tears as she looked at our mother in horror. Sage tightened his hold around her, whispering something in her ear, trying to steady her. Across the room, Rose's carefully curated composure crumbled. In a desperate, reckless movement, she lunged forward, reaching for the papers, but the manager was quicker, stepping back and holding them out of reach. "These are evidence, ma'am," he warned, his voice firm. "I suggest you stay back." Rose's chest rose and fell rapidly, sweat beading along her forehead. Her lips quivered as she fumbled for words, her mind scrambling for an escape. "I was only trying to protect this family," she stammered. "That child is a problem. She's always been a problem, just like her mother." Daisy let out a quiet sob, her small body trembling against mine. And that was it. That was the moment my rage reached its breaking point. "You think hurting a 10-year-old is protecting this family?" My voice shook, but it wasn't with fear, it was pure, undiluted fury. "You planned this, didn't you? You wanted Daisy to fail. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone." Rose shook her head wildly, as if she could somehow erase the damning truth that was now laid bare for all to see. But the evidence was in black and white, and there was no running from it. Her breaths grew erratic, her knees buckling slightly as she stumbled backward, gripping the back of a chair for support. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. "Mom, what's going on?" Violet's voice broke through the chaos, trembling with confusion and fear. "Why would you do this?" "Because," Rose's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face, "every time I look at Daisy, I see the same betrayal, the same disappointment I saw in her father. I couldn't—" She stopped, her sobs choking her words. Before anyone could respond, another voice broke the tension. "Actually," the security manager said, stepping forward, "we have more evidence." He pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen. The hotel security cameras captured the entire setup, including your meeting with our staff yesterday evening. The color drained completely from Rose's face. No, please, you don't understand. Oh, we understand perfectly, the manager said coldly, and so will the police. No, wait. Rose's voice cracked as she stumbled toward the security manager, but her path was blocked by two hotel staff members. The guests, now fully engrossed, whispered frantically among themselves, their judgmental glances burning into her like flames. Daisy clung to me tighter, her small body shaking in my arms.
The security manager calmly adjusted the tablet and looked toward me. I've already contacted the authorities, ma'am. The police are on their way. Violet, still seated on the sofa, let out a soft groan and clutched her belly. Sage panicked and knelt beside her, offering more water as she struggled to steady her breathing. Stay with me, Cass, he murmured, glancing at me for reassurance. I'll call an ambulance, I said quickly, fumbling for my phone as I stroked Daisy's hair with my other hand. But even as I dialed, my attention was drawn to Rose, whose mask of control had completely disintegrated. Her once elegant face was now tear-streaked, her makeup smudged, and her eyes wide with desperation. The sound of sirens in the distance signaled that her time was running out. I just wanted to protect this family, she screamed, collapsing onto a chair. Don't you understand? That child is a reminder of everything that went wrong. Every time I see her, I see him, the man who left me, humiliated me, and destroyed my life. My heart ached as I held Daisy closer. She's a child, Mom. She's innocent. Whatever pain Dad caused you, it has nothing to do with her. Rose let out a bitter laugh, wiping her tears with shaking hands. You don't know what it's like to have your entire world ripped apart, to be left with nothing but debts and shame while everyone at church whispers behind her back. I do know, I whispered, because you made me feel the same way after my divorce. Rose froze, her breath hitching as my words sank in. For the first time, I saw something flicker in her eyes, regret. Perhaps, but it was too late. The doors to the banquet hall burst open and two police officers entered, their boots clicking against the marble floor. The room fell silent as they approached the security manager, who handed over the pink envelope and the tablet containing the video footage. Rose stood on shaky legs, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. Please don't do this, she pleaded, her voice barely audible. One of the officers placed a hand on her shoulder. Ma'am, we need you to come with us for questioning. No! Violet's voice rang out, filled with a mix of betrayal and sorrow. Tears streamed down her face as she cradled her belly. Mom, how could you do this to us? To Daisy? Rose looked at her daughter, her lips trembling. I just wanted to protect her baby. I thought if I got rid of the problem, you'd have the perfect family. Violet shook her head, tears falling freely. You didn't protect anyone. You destroyed us. The officer gently guided Rose toward the exit, but before she could leave, Daisy's small voice stopped her in her tracks. Grandma. Daisy's eyes, still wet with tears, looked up at her. I was scared of you, but I didn't want to hate you. I thought we were family. A tear slid down Rose's cheek. We are family, she whispered, her voice breaking. But I've made too many mistakes. I stood there, watching her disappear through the doors, her figure growing smaller with each step. The weight of years of pain, betrayal, and resentment seemed to lift from my shoulders, but it left behind a hollow ache. Violet let out a soft sob as the paramedics arrived and began checking her vitals. Mom, I can't believe this, she whispered. Sage held her hand tightly, his gaze shifting to me. She needs to stay calm, he said softly. I nodded, stroking Daisy's hair once more. I know. Everything's going to be okay now. The security manager approached us with a sympathetic expression. We'll give the police everything they need. If you or your family need anything else, please let us know. Thank you, I said, my voice steady but my emotions swirling like a storm inside me. As the officers escorted Rose out of the hotel, I knew the road ahead would be long and painful. But for Daisy's sake, for Violet's sake, and for my own, I had to believe that this was the beginning of healing. The afternoon sunlight spilled through the windows of my cozy suburban home in Everdale, casting a warm, golden glow across the living room. The scent of freshly baked apple pie lingered in the air, blending with the soft sound of laughter that filled the space. On the floor, Daisy giggled as she played with her baby cousin, Ella, their joy a melody that seemed to wash away the lingering shadows of the past. "Look, Ella!" Daisy held up a stuffed rabbit, her voice full of warmth. Ella squealed in delight, her tiny hands reaching eagerly for the toy. Her laughter, bright innocent, rang through the room, a sound that felt like healing. Beside me on the couch, Violet watched the scene unfold, a peaceful expression softening her features. "Daisy is incredible with Ella," she murmured. "She's so gentle, so loving." I followed her gaze, my heart swelling with pride as I watched my daughter cradle the baby with such care. The red mark from that day had long since faded, and so had the nightmares. Therapy had helped Daisy regain her confidence, her light. And now, as I watched her, I saw not just a girl who had endured, but one who had thrived. "She's grown so much," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Violet turned to me, her gaze warm. "And how about you?" she asked gently. "How are you feeling?" I exhaled, a slow, steady breath. "Better than I have in years. It's taken time, but I think we've finally found our peace." Violet nodded, though there was a wistful sadness in her eyes. "Mom still refuses to see us, doesn't she?" I sighed, setting my coffee cup down. She's still in the nursing home, and according to the nurses, she spends most of her days writing in her diary. They say she hasn't let go of her bitterness. Violet lowered her gaze, absently tracing the rim of her cup. "I wish things could have been different." "I do too," I admitted. "But we can't control her choices. We tried, Violet. We reached out. But at some point we have to let go. That burden isn't ours to carry anymore." For a moment, silence settled between us, a quiet acknowledgement of the pain that still lingered. Then, Daisy's laughter rang out, shattering the moment like sunlight breaking through clouds. I turned to see her lifting Ella into her arms, spinning slowly in a circle while the baby squealed with delight. "Look, Mom! Ella loves when I do this." I smiled, warmth spreading through my chest. "You're going to be the best godmother ever, Daisy." Her eyes widened, sparkling with joy. She carefully set Ella down before running to me, throwing her arms around my waist. "Really, Mom?" "Really," Violet chimed in. "There's no one better for the role. You're kind, strong, and full of love, everything Ella needs." Tears welled in Daisy's eyes, but this time they were happy ones. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging us both tightly. The kitchen door creaked open, and Ethan, Violet's husband, stepped in, holding Ella's bottle. "Dinner's almost ready," he said with an easy smile. "Lily, you have to teach me how to make pie like that." I laughed. "It's a family secret, but maybe I'll let you in on it one day." He grinned before disappearing back into the kitchen, leaving Violet and me in a moment of quiet. "We're stronger now," she said, her voice steady, full of conviction. "What happened a year ago, it nearly broke us, but somehow it also gave us a chance to rebuild." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my bones. Mom's actions may have fractured us, but they hadn't destroyed us. If anything, they had pushed us toward something stronger, something real. Outside, the autumn breeze rustled the golden and crimson leaves, their colors glowing in the fading sunlight. Daisy scooped Ella into her arms again, twirling in slow circles, the baby's laughter ringing through the air like the sweetest music. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't dared to before hope. Violet reached for my hand, squeezing gently. "We've got this, Lily. We found our light again." I smiled, watching my daughter, my family, knowing that despite everything, we had made it. We had survived. We had grown. Yes, I thought to myself, the chains of the past had finally been broken. And now it was time to embrace the future. Some wounds don't heal with time, they heal when the cycle is broken. Rose didn't just slap Daisy. She shattered something much deeper. This wasn't a moment of mere frustration or discipline, it was the culmination of years of control, favoritism, and emotional manipulation. And what makes this situation so devastating is that it wasn't just directed at Lily. It extended to an innocent child, someone who should have been cherished, not treated as an inconvenience. From a psychological standpoint, toxic family dynamics often follow a pattern. Rose wasn't just cruel, she was calculating. She orchestrated an entire event to humiliate Lily and Daisy, to reinforce her own narrative that they didn't belong, that they were lesser. This isn't just about controlling people, it's about controlling the story, controlling perception. But here's the thing about abusers. They thrive on secrecy. They rely on the idea that people will look the other way, that they'll rationalize the behavior, that the victim will stay silent. When Lily stood up to Rose in front of everyone, she did something most victims never get the chance to do. She exposed the abuser in the light of day. And that's why Rose unraveled. The moment control slipped from her grasp, she had nothing left but desperation. The aftermath of situations like this is never simple. Even when the toxic person is removed, the damage lingers. Daisy may grow up questioning whether she's enough, whether she's safe, whether love is conditional. And Lily, after years of being gaslit by her own mother, will have to unlearn the belief that standing up for herself is selfish. So the real question isn't just about Rose's actions, it's about breaking the cycle. How many of us have endured toxic family relationships simply because we were told family is family? At what point do we draw the line and say, no more? What do you think? If you were Lily, would you ever let Rose back into your life? Or are some bridges meant to stay burned? Let's talk in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe for the next one.
My name is Emerson, born into simplicity. My life was nothing out of the ordinary. My family, though not wealthy in material things, was rich in love and hard work. This foundation propelled me forward, using my brains and determination to snag a spot at a public college where I didn't have to pay tuition. Numbers were my game, and playing it well landed me a degree in accounting. Fresh out of college, I snagged a job at a small company punching numbers from 9 to 5, and rented a modest apartment that I could call my own. Life was straightforward, predictable, and I liked it that way until a single invitation turned it all on its head. Emerson, you've got to join us this weekend. We're renting a yacht and heading to the coast. It's going to be epic. Sloane, my college roommate and lifelong friend, wasn't taking no for an answer. I hesitated, thinking about the pile of work on my desk. I don't know, Sloane. I've got a lot on my plate right now, I replied. Come on, you always have a lot on your plate. It's time to let loose for once. Plus, there will be plenty of handsome distractions, she teased, knowing full well how to lure me in. Fast forward, there we were, a bunch of college friends reunited, laughing and soaking up the sun on a yacht that was way fancier than anything I'd imagined. That's when he walked in. Silas, older with that kind of charm that both annoys and attracts you at the same time. The yacht belonged to him, and from the moment he spoke, I knew I was in trouble. So you're the accountant, Emerson, he asked, handing me a drink as we sailed along the coast. That's me. I count beans for a living, I replied, taking the drink, but rolling my eyes internally at the cliché line. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound. Well, I hope you're counting these moments too. Not every day you get to escape the office and hit the ocean. Our conversation flowed as if we'd known each other for years. The rest of the group faded into the background. When he suggested we go sailing together, I reminded him, I'm here with friends. Without missing a beat, he invited the whole group for another ride, but we all knew it was just me he wanted to talk to. Later, as the day turned into evening and the sky painted itself in shades of orange and pink, he leaned in close. I haven't enjoyed someone's company like this in a long time. How about dinner, just you and me this time, he said. Sure, but forget fancy. I'm more a beer and fries gal, I told him, setting my expectations straight. After swapping numbers with Silas, I was back to my routine, crunching digits, paying bills, and trying not to think too much about him. But who was I kidding? The guy had managed to wedge himself into my thoughts, stubborn as a piece of gum stuck on a shoe. Our first beer and fries date was at this dive bar that looked like it hadn't seen a renovation since the 80s. Silas was already there, nursing a pint when I walked in. I thought you weren't coming, he said, sliding over a beer to me. Thought about it, I shot back, taking a sip. The beer was good, cold. But curiosity killed the cat, right? He laughed, that sound that now felt familiar. Glad you're a risk taker. Our banter was easy, like we were picking up a conversation we'd left off in another life. We talked about everything and nothing. Work, movies, our shared disdain for early mornings. It felt natural, comfortable, too comfortable for just a first date. That night set the pace for what was to come. We were inseparable, a whirlwind of dates, late-night calls, and texts that left me grinning at my phone like a teenager. One evening, as we were closing down another dive bar, Silas looked at me, a seriousness in his gaze I hadn't seen before. I'm all in, he said, his voice steady. With you, I'm all in. It took me a moment to find my words. I'm scared, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Me too, he said, reaching for my hand, but I think you're worth the risk. That was it for me. The moment I knew this wasn't just a fling. This was something real, something terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I squeezed his hand back, the future uncertain but suddenly brighter with him in it. Let's do it then, I said, a mix of nerves and excitement bubbling up. Let's be all in. After Silas and I decided we were all in, life took on a surreal quality, like we were living in a bubble made just for the two of us. But bubbles burst, and reality hits, and hit it did the day I met his mother, Mrs. Scott. Meeting the future mother-in-law felt like stepping into the ring with an opponent you know has more experience. Her home was a fortress, each piece of furniture and decor meticulously chosen, just like the words she used. So you're the girl who's captured my son's heart, Emerson, she said, her voice cold, her eyes scanning me like I was an equation she was trying to solve. I guess I am, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Her words were like a slap, hidden behind a veneer of politeness. But what could I do? I just nodded, muttered a thank you, and tried not to let her see how much her disapproval shook me. The wedding, if you could call it that, was modest. We said our vows in a small ceremony surrounded by a handful of friends and family. I was floating, caught up in the love I felt for Silas, looking forward to the life we were going to build together. But every time I caught Mrs. Scott's eye, that cold, stern look brought me crashing back down to earth. She watched me unsmiling, as if she was memorizing my face for a wanted poster. Life after the wedding felt like sailing in uncharted waters. Working at Silas's company meant being under the same roof as his mother, who seemed to have made it her mission to watch me like a hawk. The office atmosphere was stiff whenever she was around, and I could feel the tension rise like a tide. One day, while I was buried under a mountain of paperwork, Silas dropped by my desk with a cup of coffee, his way of offering a life raft in the sea of numbers. Surviving? He asked, a playful grin on his face. Just about, I replied, accepting the coffee with a smile. Your mom's been hovering around all morning. It's like being under surveillance. Silas's smile faded a bit. Give it time. She'll come around eventually. I wasn't so sure. Later that day, I found myself alone in the break room with Mrs. Scott. Bracing myself, I attempted to break the ice. I've been thinking of some cost-saving strategies for the next quarter, I started, hoping to steer the conversation towards neutral ground. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. I'm sure you have many ideas, but this is not your family's little budget. This is my business. The word stung, reminding me of the vast ocean between her world and mine. I understand that. I'm just trying to help, I responded, struggling to keep my voice steady. Her gaze softened, if only slightly. I know you are, but understand this. This company is my life's work. I won't let anything jeopardize it, she said. Dinners at their family home were a master class in navigating stormy seas. Silas, bless him, tried to lighten the mood with jokes, but they often fell flat, swallowed by the tension between me and his mother. It was during one of these dinners that the underlying current came to a head. "So, how's the new project going?" Silas asked, attempting to steer the conversation into safe waters. Before I could answer, his mother interjected, "I'm sure we'll hear all about it at the next board meeting, right?" Her tone was polite, but the message was clear. I was an outsider, tolerated but not accepted. Silas shot me an apologetic look, but I shook my head slightly, signaling him to let it go. Navigating life with Silas and the ever-watchful eye of his mother was like trying to sail a boat with no compass. You never quite knew where you were heading. Just when I thought I had managed to steer us into calmer waters, a new storm brewed on the horizon, ready to test our resolve once more. The trouble began with the arrival of the new secretary, Ember Reese. With a flair for fashion that bordered on inappropriate for an office setting, she was the type that turned heads for all the wrong reasons. It wasn't just her attire that set off alarms, but the way she orbited Silas like a moth drawn to a flame. One afternoon, as I was trying to reconcile an accounts report that just wouldn't balance, Ember breezed into my office without knocking. "Silas asked for the Henderson file, said you'd know where it is," she announced, her voice dripping with a sweetness that was almost saccharine. I looked up, fighting the urge to point out the obvious lack of professional boundaries. "It's in the filing cabinet under H, alphabetical order. It's not hard to find," I said. She lingered a moment too long, her gaze flickering over the photos on my desk, a silent challenge in her eyes. "Thanks, I'll let him know you were super helpful," she said, her tone suggesting anything but gratitude. The days turned into weeks, and Ember's presence became more pronounced, her behavior more brazen. Whispers started among the staff, rumors of late-night meetings and closed-door sessions that had nothing to do with business. I tried to brush them off, to trust Silas, but doubt is a seed that once planted grows wild and untamed. It all came to a head one evening at a company dinner. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the buzz of success from closing a major deal. I was in the midst of congratulating one of our managers when I saw them. Silas and Ember, too close, heads bent together in a conversation that seemed to exclude the world around them. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anger and betrayal swirling like a tempest within. I made my way over, my smile fixed in place. "Enjoying the party?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. Silas looked up, startled, guilt flashing across his face before he could mask it with a smile of his own. "Absolutely. Just discussing the next steps with Ember. You know how it is," he said. I turned to Ember, who was looking at me with an expression that could only be described as smug. "I'm sure the next steps can wait until morning. It's time to celebrate now, don't you think?" I asked. The ride home was tense, a silence filling the car that was louder than any argument. It was then that I decided to confront the elephant in the room. "Is there something going on between you and Ember?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Silas's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What? No, of course not. She's just enthusiastic about her job, that's all." The weeks that followed were a blur of suspicion and half-truths. Conversations with Silas became strained, filled with unsaid words and avoided gazes. The office felt like a battleground, each day a struggle to maintain a semblance of normalcy, while the storm brewed just beneath the surface. And then it happened. The moment that broke the levee and let the floodwaters rush in. Walking into Silas's office unannounced, I found them. Silas and Ember kissing. The world as I knew it shattered, the pieces floating around me like debris in a tempest-tossed sea. Words failed me, and I walked out, the sound of my heartbreak drowned out by the storm that had finally made landfall. After the incident with Silas and Ember in his office, he tried to brush it off as a fleeting passion, nothing serious. "It was a stupid mistake. It meant nothing," he insisted, trying to downplay the whole affair. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that we could move past it. Not long after, we were at his mother's house for dinner, a setting that usually had me on edge. But that night was different. Mrs. Scott, with her sharp eye for detail, didn't hesitate to bring up Ember's behavior. "That secretary of yours," she began, her voice laced with disapproval. "She's far too provocative, both in her attire and her demeanor. It would be best if you let her go." I was surprised. Agreeing with her felt like aligning with the enemy, but I found myself nodding. "I think it's the right move." Silas, however, laughed off the suggestion. Oh, come on, Emerson. This is just jealousy talking because Ember is attractive. That's all there is to it. His words were like a slap. I felt my cheeks burn not just from the insult, but from the dismissal of our concerns. Before I could muster a response, his mother did something unexpected. "Silas," she said, her tone ice cold. "You should show your wife the respect she deserves. This has nothing to do with jealousy. It's about propriety, something you seem to have forgotten." Silas, ever wary of his mother's disapproval, quickly backpedaled. "Sorry, I didn't mean it like that," he mumbled, a sheepish look on his face. But apologies couldn't mend what was broken. One evening Silas came home late, his demeanor somber, his decision final. "Ember, she's pregnant with my child. I want a divorce. You've become boring." His words cut deeper than I thought possible. I nodded numbly as he spoke of his new love waiting for him, and then he left, leaving me in a silence so profound it felt like a void. And then I reached out to the only person I thought might understand, Mrs. Scott. Her reaction surprised me. "He did what?" she hissed through the phone, her usual composure slipping. I repeated the story, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I'll handle it, Emerson," she said, her voice cold and determined. A few days after Silas left, I was summoned to Mrs. Scott's house. I expected another round of cold stares and veiled insults. Instead, I was greeted with surprising warmth. "Sit down, Emerson," she said, her tone softer than I'd ever heard. We sat in her impeccably decorated living room, the tension that usually filled the space surprisingly absent. "I won't beat around the bush," she started, getting straight to the point. "Silas's behavior is unacceptable. We need to address this situation with Ember." I was taken aback by her directness. I don't know what to say. I thought you'd side with him." Mrs. Scott scoffed, a sound that under different circumstances might have made me flinch. "I didn't raise my son to act like a fool, and Ember, she's been a problem from the start. It's time to clean house." Her plan was simple yet bold. She had already started digging into Ember's employment records and found discrepancies, expenses that couldn't be accounted for, suspicious activity that pointed to embezzlement. "We have enough to fire her and take legal action if necessary," she stated matter-of-factly. "But why are you doing this?" I asked, genuinely curious. After everything, she fixed me with a look that was both stern and sad. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because despite our differences, you don't deserve this." After hashing out a plan with Silas's mom, I was charged with a resolve I hadn't felt in weeks. The next day, I marched into Silas's office, ready for whatever came my way. There he was, cozying up to Ember like I was just a bad memory. Ember, with that smug look on her face, dared say, "Looks like you're on the job hunt now, huh?" I couldn't help but smile, a real smile, because I knew what was coming. Pulling out the papers I had meticulously prepared, I laid them out front Silas. "Actually, I've been a bit busy uncovering some interesting facts, like how your dear Ember here has been playing fast and loose with the company's expense accounts," I replied. Ember's face turned a shade paler. "You're just trying to slander me," she shot back, but her voice was less sure, the arrogance slipping. Before either could say more, Silas's mother strode into the room, the embodiment of cold fury. "You're fired," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Your escapades with Ember and your negligence have cost you your position." Silas's face went white, his confident demeanor crumbling right before our eyes. He fell to his knees, begging his mother for forgiveness, a pathetic sight that would have been pitiable if it weren't so justified. But the real kicker was Ember's reaction. The moment she heard Silas was out of his job, her tune changed faster than a skip track. "You know what, Silas? I was never pregnant," she said, her voice cold, all pretense of affection gone. "I don't need some broke guy hanging around me." She tried to strut out of the office, but Mrs. Scott stood in her way, solid as a rock. "Not so fast. You're going to return every single penny of the $30,000 you took from the company," she demanded, her voice sharp as a blade. Ember's face went from smug to shocked in a heartbeat. "You can't prove anything," she bluffed, but her voice was shaky. "Oh, we have all the proof we need. Pay up or we'll see you in court," Silas's mom retorted, not giving an inch. In the end, Ember was booted out of the company and had to cough up the stolen money under the threat of legal action. Watching her walk out of the office defeated was a sight I never knew I needed to see. It was over. Silas was a mess on the floor, and Ember was out of our lives for good. After the whole debacle with Silas and Ember, I did what I had to do. I divorced Silas. And let me tell you, I made sure I got a fair shake in the compensation department. But just when I thought I was out, ready to start fresh somewhere new, Mrs. Scott, my former mother-in-law, threw me a curveball. She called me into her office one morning, just as I was getting my ducks in a row to leave the company, and honestly, all this mess behind. "Sit down, Emerson," she said, not wasting any breath on niceties. It was all business, which coming from her wasn't a surprise. "I'm planning on leaving," I blurted out before she could get another word in. "I think it's for the best, given everything." She held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "I want you to stay, take over as temporary director." Her words knocked the wind out of me. "What? Why would you want that after everything that's happened?" Mrs. Scott leaned back in her chair, eyeing me with that sharp gaze of hers. "Because you're good at what you do, and because I think you're the best shot this company has at bouncing back from this mess." I was stunned to say the least. The offer was unexpected, especially coming from her. "You really think I can do it?" I asked, skepticism lacing my words. "Yes, I do. You've got a head for business and a knack for making tough decisions. That's what we need right now." So that's what I did. I stayed, took the reins as the temporary director, and poured everything I had into the job. Months into my new role, Mrs. Scott and I found ourselves working late, something that had become the norm rather than the exception. One evening after a long day of meetings and decisions, Mrs. Scott and I shared a quiet moment over a cup of tea. It was a small gesture, but it symbolized how far we'd come. "You know, I never expected this," I admitted, cradling the warm mug in my hands. "After everything that happened, I thought I'd be on my own." Mrs. Scott looked at me, her expression thoughtful. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it? We find allies in the most unlikely places." I smiled, a sense of peace settling over me. "Yes, it does, and I'm grateful for it." Months turned into a year since I took the helm as the temporary director, and what a year it was. The company had stabilized, and we were actually seeing growth again. It was hard work, but rewarding in ways I couldn't have imagined. Mrs. Scott and I had become a formidable team, a fact that still amazed me when I stopped to think about it. One crisp morning as autumn painted the city in hues of orange and red, Mrs. Scott called me into her office for what I assumed was our regular strategy meeting. But the look on her face told me this was something different. "Emerson," she began, her tone more solemn than usual, "I've been doing some thinking about the future, my future, and the future of this company." A knot formed in my stomach. "Okay, I'm listening." She took a deep breath, her gaze meeting mine. "I'm planning to retire." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. "Retire? But you're the heart of this company. Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure," she replied with a nod. "It's time for me to enjoy life outside of these walls, and it's time for new leadership here." My mind raced with the implications of her words. What does this mean for the company? For me? "For me, it means," she said, pausing for emphasis, "that I want you to take over as the permanent CEO. The silence that followed was heavy with shock and realization. "Me? Are you serious?" "Completely serious," she affirmed. "You've proven yourself more than capable. You've earned this." The responsibility was enormous, the prospect both exhilarating and terrifying. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll do it," she urged, a rare smile breaking through her usual stoic demeanor. "Say you'll lead this company into its next chapter." I took a moment, letting the weight of her offer sink in. Then, with a deep breath, I found my resolve. "I'll do it. I'll give it everything I've got." "Good," she said, her approval evident. I knew I made the right choice. As the days turned to weeks and my new role became reality, Mrs. Scott and I grew even closer, our relationship evolving from mere acquaintances to genuine friends. It was an unexpected turn of events, but one I cherished deeply. Silas, on the other hand, was left with nothing. His mother, firm in her decisions, took back everything she had given him, the expensive car, the yacht, all of it. He was jobless, without the luxury he was so accustomed to, all because he chose betrayal over family. My future was bright, filled with new challenges and opportunities. And while Silas was a chapter of my past, I wish to forget. The lessons I learned and the relationships I built were my stepping stones to a better tomorrow. I smoothed out the wrinkles on my silk evening gown and took a deep breath. Tonight's celebration dinner at the country club was supposed to be a joyous occasion, marking my husband Patrick's retirement after decades at the helm of Robinson Industries. Little did I know it would become the stage for one of the most shocking betrayals of my life. As we clinked champagne glasses with the board members and their spouses, Patrick cleared his throat. "I have an announcement to make," he declared, his eyes flickering towards a young woman at the other end of the table. My heart sank as I recognized Brooklyn Taylor, one of the junior marketing executives. The way Patrick looked at her made my stomach churn. "Hazel and I have decided to get divorced," Patrick continued, his voice unwavering. "I've fallen in love with someone else and we plan to marry soon." A hush fell over the table as gasps and murmurs erupted. I felt all eyes boring into me, waiting for my reaction. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You coward!" I spat at Patrick, my voice trembling with fury. "How dare you blindside me like this?" "I'm sorry, Hazel," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "But I've made up my mind. Brooklyn understands me in a way you never could." As the dinner descended into chaos, I excused myself, desperate for air. Out on the terrace, I leaned against the railing, trying to steady my breathing. Anger and humiliation washed over me in waves. Patrick had been my whole world for over 30 years. We'd built Robinson Industries together from the ground up, sacrificing countless nights and weekends. And this was how he repaid me, by casting me aside for some young thing half my age. I wiped away a stray tear, my jaw clenched with determination. If Patrick thought I would go down without a fight, he was sorely mistaken. Game on, I thought grimly. The gloves were coming off. I tossed and turned that night, replaying the horror of Patrick's betrayal over and over in my mind. How could the man I'd loved and supported for decades do this to me, to our family? As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, I knew I couldn't wallow in misery any longer. If Patrick wanted war, then war was what he'd get. I marched into the private bathroom and examined my reflection in the mirror. Though my eyes were puffy from crying, my resolve had never been stronger. I was Hazel Robinson, and I would not be the victim here. The first order of business was hiring a bulldog of a divorce attorney. I had my secretary line up meetings with the city's most cutthroat legal hawks. Within a matter of hours, I was sitting across from Haley Harris, a ferocious litigator known for devouring wandering husbands. "I want to bleed him dry," I stated bluntly as Haley flipped through my financial documents. She arched an immaculately groomed eyebrow. "Even with your substantial assets, a nasty divorce could deplete your net worth considerably," she said. "Money is no object," I said through gritted teeth. "That lying snake is going to pay for what he did to me and my family's legacy." A feral grin spread across Haley's razor-sharp features. "Then let's make sure we take him for everything he's worth." Over the next few weeks, I followed Haley's guidance to the letter, marshaling every resource at my disposal. Quiet instructions were issued to Robinson Industries' accounting department for a full forensic audit. Under the guise of routine due diligence, every bank statement, every money transfer, I wanted them combed through with a fine-tooth comb. And Haley coached me on sowing seeds of doubt among the board members, suggesting personal concerns over Patrick's ability to properly steer the company given his emotionally compromised state. A few whispered comments here, a furrowed brow there, and suddenly the company I'd helped build was questioning my husband's leadership. All the while, Patrick sauntered around in a loved-up daze, oblivious to the powder keg I was carefully constructing around him. He thought I would simply walk away, that I would be content with whatever crumbs he'd deigned to toss my way in the divorce. The poor fool had no idea what kind of hell was coming. The forensic audit quickly bore fruit, revealing a tangled web of shady dealings, all connected to Patrick's desperation to impress his young mistress. Inflated expense reports, kickbacks from vendors, even outright embezzlement. He'd put Robinson Industries' financial health at risk to fund his lavish courtship of Brooklyn. I pored over the damning documents late into the night, my fury growing with each uncovered impropriety. This was the true depth of Patrick's deceit. He was willing to sacrifice our life's work, the company we built from nothing, all for a fling with a girl young enough to be his daughter. The next morning, I hand-delivered the audit findings to the board, making sure to linger on the most egregious violations with pointed commentary. Clearly, Patrick's judgment has been clouded by his personal indiscretions, I stated, careful to keep my tone measured despite the storm raging inside me. I shudder to think how much further this rot might have spread if left unchecked, I finished. One by one, I watched the concern etching itself onto the board members' faces. Even Patrick's most ardent supporters couldn't deny the evidence of his mismanagement and potential criminality. Patrick, for his part, seemed stunned by my revelations. The fool actually had the audacity to pull me aside and try to plead ignorance. "Hazel, you have to believe me. I never meant for things to go this far," he blubbered. "I've made some mistakes, sure, but it was all for love." I recoiled from his clammy grasp, disgust written plain across my face. "For love? You jeopardized everything we built together for some cheap fling. I don't even recognize you anymore." As if summoned, Brooklyn appeared in the doorway, her overdone makeup unable to mask the fragility beneath. Patrick's eyes immediately locked onto her, his entire stance changing as if their bond transcended the tawdry reality. "Don't worry, my dear," he said once the old ball and chain is out of the way. "Nothing will keep us apart." The naked cruelty in his voice awakened an icy clarity in me. Forget taking him for everything he was worth. This man deserved to lose it all. I crossed the room and stood squarely between Patrick and his prize. "Let me make one thing clear to both of you," I said, my voice steely. "I am not going anywhere. This company was my life long before you came along, Brooklyn, and I'll be damned if I let either of you destroy it with your recklessness." Brooklyn opened her mouth, panicked eyes flicking to Patrick for support, but I cut her off with a sharp gesture. "As for you, I didn't survive decades of your insufferable selfishness to be scrapped in my years." I shifted my furious gaze to my soon-to-be ex-husband. "You want to play in the mud with this girl? Be my guest. But I guarantee the only thing awaiting you is regret." Turning on my heel, I left them gaping in my wake, already planning my next salvo. Let them have their fantasy for now. Their world was about to come crashing down. With the audit findings laying bare Patrick's misdeeds, I knew I held all the leverage for ensuring a favorable divorce settlement. Still, I intended to twist the knife further before going in for the kill. I requested an emergency meeting with Patrick, putting on my best act of contriteness. "I've had some time to reflect on things," I began, wringing my hands for effect. "And I realize now how terribly I've behaved." Patrick's eyes widened in surprise, and I fought back the urge to sneer at his gullibility. "Really? You're finally coming around?" "I was just so hurt and angry," I continued, letting my voice quaver with manufactured regret. "But I see now that I can't force you to love me. You've found happiness with Brooklyn, and it's not my place to stand in the way of true love." The smug satisfaction oozing from his expression was almost too much to bear. "Well, I'm glad you've come to your senses. This has been difficult enough without your vindictiveness making things worse." I reached across the table and grasped his hand, putting on my best pleading expression. "I only want what's best for you, Patrick, which is why you have to end this affair immediately." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What? Why would I do that?" Leaning in, I lowered my voice conspiratorially. "Because I'm afraid Brooklyn has been using you this whole time, taking advantage of your generous nature for her own gain." Patrick opened his mouth to protest, but I barreled on with my carefully constructed narrative. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've discovered evidence that she's been having other dalliances. Multiple affairs, Patrick. She's been bleeding you dry to fund her indiscretions behind your back." His face cycled through a kaleidoscope of emotions: anger, hurt, disbelief. "No, Brooklyn would never. We love each other." Putting on my most sorrowful expression, I gave his hand a pat. "I'm so sorry, but it's true. The bank records, the money transfers. It's all there in black and white. She's been making a fool of you." Patrick's shoulders slumped in defeat, and for just an instant, I felt a pang of satisfaction. For a moment there was a feeling of pity, but it quickly passed when I remembered all the agony he had put me through. "If it's any consolation, this newfound wisdom has made me realize how deeply I've misjudged you over the years," I lied through my teeth. Why, if I had a partner who showed half the care and steadfast dedication you've displayed, I would consider myself the luckiest woman alive." That seemed to bolster Patrick's spirits somewhat, as he mumbled a thank you. Men were so easy to manipulate when you mastered their fragile egos. As he lumbered out, I allowed myself a satisfied smile between the gaping financial void awaiting him, and the carefully planted seeds of doubt about his precious Brooklyn's fidelity. Patrick's world was crumbling all around him. Just a few more shoves and the whole pathetic facade would come crashing down in delicious ruin. With Patrick reeling from my revelations about Brooklyn's supposed infidelity, it was time to go for the kill shot. I convened an emergency board meeting, putting on my most solemn expression as the members filed in. "I'm afraid I have some deeply troubling news regarding Patrick's conduct as CEO," I began once everyone was seated. "It pains me to have to do this, but the evidence leaves me no choice." I nodded to my assistant, who handed out the audit results to everyone, letting the weight of the financials speak for themselves. Audible gasps and murmurs rippled through the room as they digested the extent of the embezzlement and misappropriation. "As you can see, Patrick has been systematically looting the company's coffers, all to fund an utterly unacceptable personal relationship," I declared, letting the accusation hang heavy in the air. "His judgment has been hopelessly compromised to a degree that constitutes gross dereliction of duty," I continued. Magnus Grimes, one of the senior board members known for his unshakable ethics, set down the report with a look of profound disappointment. I had my suspicions given the rumors, but I never imagined the depths of Patrick's betrayal. "This is a gut punch, believe me." "Magnus, I understand your pain all too well," I replied, putting on my most mournful expression. "Which is why, as difficult as it is, I feel we have no choice but to relieve Patrick of his duties effective immediately." A chorus of solemn nods rippled through the room. Even those typically loyal to Patrick seemed unable to overlook his staggering lapses. Gritting my teeth, I forced out my next words. "It truly breaks my heart to say this, but Patrick's personal indiscretions appear to have sent him into an emotional tailspin, calling into question his fitness to lead this company. For the good of Robinson Industries and our employees, I recommend an indefinite leave of absence on medical grounds while he seeks treatment." The cautious reactions told me they had taken the bait. By portraying Patrick's ouster as a compassionate intervention rather than a straight termination, I had given them all plausible deniability to avoid feeling complicit in his downfall. As the meeting adjourned with the board's full endorsement, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. Everything was falling into place perfectly. The forensics, the sowing of doubts, and now this coup. Some part of me felt a slight sadness at how far my beloved husband had fallen. But he himself chose to destroy the life we were building together because of his arrogance and weakness. I merely ensured he suffered the full consequences. My reverie was interrupted by the ping of a new email from Haley, my attorney. Pulling up the message, I scanned her concise update and felt a rush of vicious satisfaction. "Transfer of assets proceeding as planned. The financial guillotine is primed. Just say the word." I typed a simple reply. "Do it. Let the delicious ruination begin." The dominoes began falling into place with ruthless precision. Within days of being forced into a leave of absence, Patrick found himself being systematically frozen out of Robinson Industries operations. Emails went unanswered, meetings rescheduled until he was essentially a ghost presence at the company he had once lorded over. I could only imagine the sinking feeling in the pit of his gut as the power he had taken for granted for decades slipped through his fingers. Still, I knew the worst was yet to come for the arrogant fool. "Miss Robinson, you have a visitor," my assistant's voice crackled over the intercom. "Brooklyn Taylor is asking to see you." A cruel smile tugged at my lips as I buzzed her in. The girl's arrival was right on schedule. Brooklyn entered, looking every bit the rabbit caught in the headlights. Though she tried valiantly to maintain her polished composure, I could see the cracks spiderwebbing beneath the surface. "What can I do for you, dear?" I asked in my most saccharine tone as she took a seat. "I trust this isn't about your extracurricular activities with Patrick." "I would simply hate for word of that unpleasantness to spread further." Her eyes went wide with panic. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing." I waved a perfectly manicured hand in feigned nonchalance. Just that it would be an awful shame if those private investigator reports detailing your numerous other affairs ended up going public. Can you imagine the scandal? Brooklyn paled, and I fought back the urge to cackle at her obvious distress. The phony dossier I had concocted were truly works of art. But that's not true, she sputtered. Patrick and I, we love each other. It's just us. If you say so, dear, I replied coolly. Though if I were you, I might be more concerned with his mounting legal troubles and the likelihood of financial ruin. That caught her attention, as I'd intended. Leaning forward, I laid it all out for her in brutal clarity, the fraud charges looming over Patrick, the asset freezes, the inevitable collapse of his net worth once the divorce was finalized. Do you honestly think a man facing prison time and bankruptcy will have any qualms about leaving you high and dry? I asked with mock sympathy. Or that you'll still hold any appeal to him once the thrill of your tawdry affair fades? Brooklyn's porcelain features crumpled as the truth sank in. She was nothing more than a disposable plaything to Patrick, shiny arm candy to be cast aside the moment she ceased to be convenient. You're lying, she whispered, but it was clear she didn't believe her own words. Smiling thinly, I pushed the killing blow. If I were you, I'd get out while you still can. Get over your losses and find yourself a fresh victim to make a profit off of. There are plenty of rich, desperate fools out there to exploit. A single tear rolled down Brooklyn's cheek as she stared at me in a wordless stupor. I gave her a few moments to absorb the reality crashing down around her before delivering the final twist of the knife. Oh, and one more thing before you go running back to that pathetic creature you've been betting, I added with sugary venom. I'd strongly advise emptying out any of Patrick's personal accounts or assets you have access to. You'll need whatever you can get to restart your entrepreneurial activities. For just an instant, Brooklyn's mask slipped, and I saw the ruthless mercenary parasite lurking underneath. That was all the confirmation I needed that my carefully planted mole had succeeded in guiding her toward the path of maximum damage. Nodding to herself, Brooklyn stood and wiped away the crocodile tears before squaring her shoulders in false bravado. You're going to regret this, she spat out in a tremulous voice, utterly devoid of conviction. I simply laughed as she turned on her heel and stormed out. The delusional girl had no idea how correct she was, but not for the reasons she thought. Once this was all over, the only regret I would feel was not destroying them even sooner. The end game was finally upon us. Within weeks of Brooklyn's hasty exit, the other shoe dropped with a reverberating thud that shook Patrick to his core. I took no small pleasure in being present as the investigator from our corporate security team laid out the damning evidence. Bank statements, wire transfers, photos, an entire dossier documenting how Brooklyn had systematically looted over 7 figures from Patrick's personal accounts and investment portfolios. She couldn't have, Patrick stammered, his face becoming an ashen mask of disbelief. We were going to start a life together. The investigator simply shrugged, his expression emphatically neutral. I'm afraid the money trail doesn't lie, Mr. Robinson. This appears to have been a long-running scheme to bleed you dry. Patrick's eyes found mine, pleading for a lifeline amidst the crashing waves of betrayal. Hazel, you have to believe me. I never thought she was capable of something like this. I don't understand, he choked out. Why would she do this to me after everything I sacrificed? I allowed myself a feral smile. Isn't it obvious? You were nothing more than a means to an end. A vain, gullible fool ripe for the fleecing by someone younger and prettier who knew just which strings to pull. Patrick opened his mouth, no doubt to try and defend his precious Brooklyn's honor, but I silenced him with a raised hand. Save your breath and what little dignity you have left. This is just the opening salvo. The avalanche is coming and you're going to lose everything. Over the next several days, the full scope of Patrick's ruination began revealing itself. The financial penalties and legal fees started piling up, draining his liquid assets. Forensic auditors identified even more dubious transactions and potential tax avoidance schemes, bringing down the wrath of the IRS. Meanwhile, the revelations of corporate malfeasance I had carefully stoked stripped Patrick of every remaining board seat, entitlement, position. He went from captaining a billion-dollar empire to a shunned pariah in the span of a month, his legacy crumbling into dust. The killing blow, however, came from an unexpected direction. It was the gossip and society pages that once praised his fairy tale marriage to me. With the collapse of his non-disclosure agreement as part of the divorce proceedings, I carefully fed tantalizing morsels about his affair and accompanying spending benders to key media contacts. Soon, tales of poor, used Patrick and his gold-digging mistress were splashed across the glossies in salacious detail. A scandal of such delicious karmic proportions was simply too irresistible to avoid, no matter how much old money changed hands to smother it. Initially, in one final insult, Patrick's beloved country club membership was terminated under a cloud of humiliation, the old guard closing ranks around him like a vice. He had become a cautionary tale, something to be shunned and whispered about over chilled martinis. When he inevitably crawled back to me begging for clemency and a chance to restore some fragment of his former life, I denied him with icy finality. "This is the bed you made for yourself, Patrick," I said, unmoved by his pleas. "I suggest you learn to sleep in it." As he slumped away, broken and discarded, I felt an unfamiliar sensation blossom within me, not quite happiness, but perhaps a sense of resolution. This chapter of betrayal and trauma was finally closed, allowing me to turn my focus to what lay ahead. The machinations had been brutally unpleasant, but a necessary crucible to ensure my complete autonomy moving forward. Never again would I allow anyone or anything to compromise the destiny I had fought so hard for. I was Hazel Robinson, newly anointed captain of my own fate, and the world had better be ready for my brand of merciless stewardship. As the ashes settled from the scorched battlefield that was my divorce, I wasted no time in firmly establishing my leadership over Robinson Industries. The board meetings that had once been merely a formality were now the arenas where I flexed my hard-won power. Profitability is down over 12% compared to last quarter's projections, I stated in a tone that broke no argument as I stared down the assembled executives. I want to know why, and I want solutions on my desk within 48 hours. There was a momentary silence as the senior leadership team avoided eye contact, each silently willing one of the others to step into the firing line first. Finally, Trenton, the recalled CFO who had been Patrick's loyal foot soldier for years, cleared his throat. The shortfalls can likely be attributed to the recent transition and its attending disruptions, he began, choosing his words carefully. Not to mention the lingering PR headaches from, My eyes narrowed dangerously. "You mean the scandal my dear ex-husband caused with his reprehensible behavior? The one that jeopardized the future of the entire company because of his recklessness?" Trenton visibly shrank back, face flushing. "Well, I didn't mean to imply—" "Save it!" I cut him off with a withering glare. "I don't want to hear any more excuses about factors beyond our control. We make our own destiny here, and anyone unable to adapt to my leadership would be wise to explore other opportunities." The room had gone deathly quiet, the temperature seeming to drop several degrees as the gathered executives finally recognized the new power dynamics at play. This was no longer the Robinson Industries of old, where decisions were debated ad nauseum behind closed doors. There would be no more nods to consensus or democratic hand-wringing. My edicts would be final words. Mrs. Robinson Estelle, the head of operations, ventured after clearing her throat. "If I may be so bold, your decisive vision is a marked change from how we've traditionally operated. I think I speak for everyone when I say an adjustment period will be required before we can realign strategy." A few cautious nods rippled through the table, though most seemed to sense the undercurrent of defiance in Estelle's words. My jaw clenched as tightly as you could crack a walnut. I rose slowly to my feet and gave Estelle a look that would have kicked up dust. "Let me make one thing crystalline for you and your cohorts," I said, my voice like razors scraping steel. "I endured decades of being poisoned and humiliated by this spineless bastard I called husband, only to face further humiliation at the hands of his underlings." Estelle shrank back in her seat, all bravado evaporating as I stalked around the table toward her. I could sense the others watching with a mixture of disbelief and morbid fascination. None dared intervene as the new order asserted itself. "This company's oligarchic days are over," I stated, leaning in until Estelle was forced to maintain eye contact. Either acclimate to my leadership and start pulling your weight, or I'll find those better suited to my vision. Am I making myself clear? I demand. She nodded almost imperceptibly, seeming to have momentarily forgotten how to form words. Straightening up, I turned my gaze to encompass the entire assembly. I did not fight my way through the depths of hell itself just to be undermined again. Robinson Industries answers to me now, and me alone. My lip curled slightly. And if that reality is too difficult for any of you to accept, I'd be more than happy to expedite your transition into unemployment. The silence that followed spoke volumes. The machine had a new master, and woe betide anyone foolish enough to forget that. As the meeting disbanded, I allowed myself a tight, predatory smile. This was merely an opening gambit, the first assertion of the ruthlessness that would be required to remake this company in my own image. Pity Patrick hadn't possessed even a fraction of my strength and resolve. Those final years he frittered away in pursuit of his youthful indulgences. Perhaps then this painful transition would have been avoided. But in the end, his failures had become my greatest advantage, the forge where my own ferocious independence was smelted, where I emerged hardened, immutable, and finally in complete control of my destiny. I was Hazel Robinson, and from this day forward, my name would be synonymous with strength, perseverance, and remorseless ambition. All that remained was for the rest of the world to take heed. Hello, my name is Marilyn and I'm 35 years old. My biggest dream growing up was to be a journalist, or at least work with magazines. I had a flair for writing and became pretty well versed with trends, so it came as no shock when I pursued journalism and media in college. After I graduated, I steadily moved from one firm to another, but none of them were the big tabloids. I didn't mind because I was doing something I dreamed of for years. Eventually, I landed in a pretty big firm and felt like I had finally achieved the best that I could. A good few years had passed since graduating college, and at around 29, I met my husband, Frank. Frank came from a pretty wealthy family with their own business. I'm only mentioning this because his mother, Heather, always hated and insulted me, believing I was of a lower status than him, so I shouldn't have married him. Anyway, Frank and I dated for around 3 years before we decided to tie the knot. As I said, Heather, Frank's mother, was not happy with me. She always belittled me and made fun of the fact that I worked for a magazine and had a degree in journalism. I was pretty hurt and upset at first, but for some reason, Heather felt it was okay to do that to me. Frank always stood up for me against his mother, and his father Idris also stood up for me whenever he was around to hear the things Heather said. I was grateful for both of them. But as the months wore on, I began to get used to Heather's insults. Frank had even proposed we go low contact with her initially, but I didn't agree with that. Frank worked with his father, and if he stopped talking to his mother, that might make things awkward for Idris. Idris was truly an amazing person, and I didn't want him to be put in a position like that. I also didn't want Frank to cut his family off because of me. I learned to be okay with it, mostly because we only ever met Heather twice a month at most. But that changed when Idris had to go overseas for some business project. Heather made a big deal about not wanting to be alone, so Frank and I agreed to let her stay with us until Idris got back. I had a gut feeling that I would regret it, but in my head, family always came first. Of course, it was hard to live with her when she constantly scrutinized and criticized everything I did, along with the insults thrown in my face at all times. But I didn't mind all that as long as she never actually caused any damage to me. That changed during one fateful week. I had a pretty big presentation coming up. We were redesigning a particular section of our magazine, and I was in charge of providing a good redo. That presentation was going to be the one that would decide if I was going to get a promotion. Of course, Heather didn't know why it was important. I doubt her knowing would have changed her perception of me anyway. Since Heather was staying with us, she saw just how stressed out I was about it. The night before the presentation, I was talking to Frank about how excited I was when she heard us, walked into the living room and decided to speak her mind. "This is a big deal. All of the big bosses will be watching me," I said excitedly. "I can't imagine just how scary this must be for you," my husband said. "I'm glad you had it relatively easier with your business, but this is such a different game. I'm so scared of messing everything up," I continued. Hey, don't say that. You'll do great, Frank tried to encourage. I would love to believe that. I just feel so unsure of everything. What if I did a bad job with the presentation? I hesitated. I couldn't help but overhear the both of you talking, mother-in-law intervened. Oh, we're kind of having a private conversation right now, I replied. Well, Marilyn, I just wanted to say that you have nothing to worry about. You most definitely do not have the skill set for anything, so you will most probably do bad tomorrow. There was a mocking tone in my mother-in-law's voice. Excuse me, I wondered. Look, just treat it as an opportunity to stop working and become a housewife. At least that way you'll be deserving of my son. I can't believe he actually married a journalist. My mother-in-law continued wryly. Mom, you are severely overstepping boundaries right now. Get out, Frank said angrily. You know what? I shouted angrily. I have no time for your nonsense, Heather. I have bigger things to worry about than your opinion of me and my relationship with your son. How dare you speak to me that way? Heather asked. Oh, so it's okay for you to speak to me that way, but not the other way around, I answered. Frank, say something. Your wife is being mean to your mother again, Heather complained. She's simply standing up for herself. I see nothing wrong with it, Frank said. She brainwashed you. Look at how you can so easily turn your back on family. Marilyn will regret this, Heather continued. I was fuming at the audacity that Heather had to just barge into Frank and my conversation and insult me so blatantly. Frank obviously tried to apologize for his mother's behavior, but I stopped him before he could. He was not responsible for his mother's hurtful behavior. We decided to call it a night after that and went to sleep. I was way too focused on everything else going on to even think about Heather's threat towards me. I figured that her threat only meant her tormenting me more, which honestly I didn't care about at that moment. That was a battle to fight after my presentation. The next day, I rushed into work with my laptop in hand. When I opened it, I immediately realized that something was wrong. All of the files that had been there on my desktop were missing. A quick look through my laptop made me realize that it had been reformatted. I began panicking. I had emailed the presentation to myself, so I tried to calm down with that thought. I logged into my email account only to see all, and I mean all, my emails deleted. Even the trash was emptied. I felt my heart sink and tears sprang to my eyes. I felt fear like no other in that moment. I had to go up to my boss and explain my predicament to him, and he was not happy with me. I had to listen to him yell at me for a good while before being told not to bother with the presentation, because he had already had someone else handle it in case I messed up. I knew at that moment that any opportunity for me to grow in that company had been squashed. I couldn't believe that that was what my life had come to. I rushed back home in tears. Frank hadn't left for work yet, but on seeing my state, he took the day off. He wrapped his arms around me and let me cry for a while. When I calmed down a little, he asked me, "What happened, darling? Did the presentation go that bad?" "There was no presentation to begin with, at least one that I gave," I sobbing said. "What do you mean? You worked so hard on that. You barely slept those past few days because you were preparing so hard for it." "I know. When I got there, I opened my laptop only to see that the entire thing had gotten reformatted." "What? How did that happen?" he said in surprise. "I have no idea. It was so embarrassing and humiliating to have to explain that to my boss," I sobbed in confusion. Wait, did you not maybe back it up somewhere else?" he asked. "Yeah, I emailed it to myself, but even my inbox and trash were cleared out," I uttered. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. What did your boss say?" Frank continued. "Well, he yelled at me a bunch for being unprofessional and lazy. He had someone else take care of the presentation," I said. "But you still have your job, right?" he asked hopefully. "I do, but I'm going to be stuck in this position at this company. There's no way I can earn any promotions or climb the ladder. I'm done here." "Oh, honey, I'm sure you'll find a better job. I'll be by your side through it all. Don't you worry about a thing. You just keep working here until you feel like it's appropriate to quit," Frank backed me up. "Yeah, I'll give in my 6 weeks notice right now. I can't believe I did all of that, and just when I almost had what I wanted, it slipped right through my fingers." I was pretty depressed after that, if I'm being honest. I take pride in my ability to deliver good results on all my projects, and to have something this jarring happen to me was traumatic, to say the least. I wasn't handed any more big projects or even good projects at work. I had held back giving in my notice, but after another week of working there, I knew that my time was actually done. I handed in my notice and just waited until my time there was done. In all of this, Heather seemed to be oddly gleeful. She once again happened to walk by our room and saw me crying after I had rushed back home. Frank told her to leave us alone, but she looked happy. She kept making remarks about how she had told me that I would bomb the presentation. At first, I was very resentful of her, and then I began to think about her behavior a little more. Sure, one of the reasons she could have been really happy was that I was finally going to become a housewife after I was done working with the company. Or she was happy because she had something to do with my mishap that led to me having my career ruined. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but I had this feeling in my gut that told me that she had something to do with my laptop being reformatted and my files deleted. I wanted to approach Frank about it, but I didn't want to go to him without at least some evidence. I needed to figure out just how I was going to prove that Heather did something. I figured that I could just set her up, but before that, I got myself a hidden camera to set up in the office so I could capture Heather sabotaging me. I ordered myself a camera that looked like a smoke detector and placed it on the ceiling. I connected it to my phone, and I was ready to go with my plan. The next part was somehow only informing Heather about my upcoming presentation. That wasn't very hard to do. All I had to do was pace around in the office and look worried. Frank was still at work, and he had no real way of knowing what was going on. Heather saw me pacing around and walked in to ask me what was going on. "What's going on? Why do you look so anxious again?" "Another project." "Shh, look, I need to tell someone about this, and since you asked, I've been given another opportunity to present my stuff, and I could be given a raise," I said. "Oh, really?" Heather marveled. I continued, "Yeah, and I'm really anxious about it because this really is my last time to make things right, and I have to do this properly." "Why aren't you telling Frank about this? Is it because your job is embarrassing?" Mother-in-law asked. "No, it's because I don't want to get his hopes up. I feel like I disappointed him last time, and I don't want to do it again. Just keep it between the both of us," I replied. "Yeah, I'm not making any promises about that, although it'll be really fun to watch you crumble again tomorrow," Heather scoffed mockingly. "Why do you always wish for my downfall?" I gasped. "I just think that you're better suited to being a housewife. That's way less embarrassing than whatever you're doing right now." "You know what? I don't have time for this, nor do I care about what you think about me. Please just leave me alone to practice my presentation before Frank gets back home." Heather left me, but not before eyeing my laptop and smirking at me. I could feel in my bones that something was about to happen. I waited a little while longer in the office and only walked away when Frank got back home. Heather kept her mouth shut about my presentation, but she kept smirking at me during dinner. After Frank and I returned to bed, I opened the footage of the cabinet on my phone and kept a watch on it in case I saw any movement. Frank and I watched a couple of episodes of a TV series like we did every night. There wasn't any movement until midnight. I watched as Heather entered the cabinet. I immediately drew Frank's attention to my phone screen. Frank looked confused at first, but he watched as Heather got into my laptop and began messing around until my laptop shut off and restarted. Frank looked at me for an explanation, and I explained to him what I had done. To say he was enraged that Heather would be an understatement. Heather was still in the cabinet because she decided to stick around and snoop through my stuff. Frank got off the bed and stormed into the cabinet. He threw open the door, and Heather paled when she saw him. Frank did try his best to remain calm, so he just asked her what she was doing in the office. "What are you doing in the office, Mom?" Heather was confused. "Oh, I wasn't doing anything." "Oh, really? And why is Marilyn's laptop still open?" he asked. "Are you accusing me of going through her stuff?" Heather uttered. "I think you did way more than that, Mom," Frank said. "First of all, I only walked in here because I thought that room needed cleaning, and secondly, you know your wife is stupid. She probably just forgot to shut her laptop." She excused herself. "You took on the job of cleaning the office at 12 a.m.? Also, don't you dare talk about Marilyn that way." Frank's voice sounded angry. "You don't talk to me that way. You may be a grown man, but I'm still your mother. my mother-in-law defended herself. Yeah, my mother who loves to hurt and sabotage my wife, he continued. What are you talking about? She asked. We caught you on camera resetting Marilyn's laptop, my husband said. You were spying on me, Heather uttered. No, we just thought that we should take extra cautionary measures to make sure that what happened with Marilyn never happened again. That's disgusting! How dare you film me without my consent? The mother-in-law was trying to be indignant. I didn't put up any cameras in your room. I put it in my office and you entered it without my consent. Also, even if it was disgusting, it's nowhere near as disgusting as what you did to Marilyn. I want you out of our house first thing in the morning, Frank added. But I'll be all alone, Heather objected. I don't care. I don't want to talk to you, Frank finished. The next morning, Heather tried to stall around by helping make breakfast and clean the dishes, but Frank was not having any of it. As soon as she was done washing the dishes, Frank came downstairs with her 2 bags. He told her that he had packed her things for her and ordered her an Uber. Heather tried to beg him to stay and even began crying, which was a very weird experience considering she was usually the one who made others cry. Frank left her standing there and went to our room. Heather turned to me and began yelling at me for setting her up. I told her that if there was anyone that should be yelling, it was me. She's lucky that I haven't released the footage to all her friends and family, but if she overstepped, I would make sure that everyone saw it. If there was one thing that all her friends and family were big on, it was being kind. If they found out what she had done to me, she would lose them all. There was no way that she would risk that, so she immediately shut up. After Heather left, I felt a lot lighter. I was still upset about my work situation, but I knew that I could bounce back and do better than I did before. Frank was the biggest help in my entire journey to where I finally reached. Once my notice period was over, I took some time off to not only rest, but also calibrate which direction I wanted to head in. The next few months were spent taking a bunch of courses on other niches in my field. I knew that if I focused on a particular niche and landed the right job, I could earn a lot more. I didn't want to expose Heather, but after years of her belittling me, I wanted to rub it in her face just what I was capable of doing. I wanted to reach the heights that even she never got to see. And that's exactly what I did. Frank helped put in a good word for me in multiple places. The best thing that came out of being rich was the sheer number of connections that one has at their disposal. Thanks to my experience and all the help that Frank gave me, I managed to land a position of chief editor in a very big-name magazine. I'm talking about a worldwide big-name magazine. The work was hard, but it was all worth it. Somewhere in my journey to becoming the chief editor, I forgot how I wanted to show Heather what I was capable of. In fact, in those months, we hadn't had any contact with her. I knew that Frank spoke with his father because, well, they worked together. But Frank hadn't heard much from or about his mother. His father Idris told him that she was upset at us about something but refused to tell him what. At least Heather took my warning seriously. But I had to meet her eventually. It just so happened that my company was throwing a huge party for which a lot of big names were invited, including Heather and Idris. Frank and I dressed to the nines because for the first time, we were both people who were big names. When we got to the venue, we were immediately spotted by Heather and Idris. They waved us over and we greeted them. Heather looked me up and down before smirking. "Wow, look at you trying to fit in, Marilyn," she said. "Don't listen to a word she says, Marilyn. You look lovely, like you always do," Idris uttered. "Thanks a lot, Idris," I replied. "So, how have you been, Marilyn? You're unemployed?" Idris asked. Before I could answer, Heather intervened. "Oh yeah, she had a whole blunder with her job, and they let her go. I've always talked about how she's unfit for our son. Look at her. She can't even hold down a job." "That's enough, Mom. Stop talking about her," Frank interrupted her. "It's sad enough that I have to see her everywhere we go," Heather continued. "I wouldn't have to do that if you just left her like I told you to." Frank got angry. "Okay, that's enough. You either stop talking or I'm leaving. But Marilyn, sweetie, let me know if you need a job, okay? It would be a pleasure to work with you," Idris said. "That is such a kind thing of you to offer, Idris, but I'm afraid that I can't take you up on the offer," I answered. "Figures. I told you she's lazy and incompetent." The mother-in-law wouldn't stop. Just then my name was called and people started cheering. I looked towards the small stage, and the CEO was there waving at me and beckoning me over to the stage. I turned towards Idris and Heather and excused myself. Idris looked amused, while Heather looked confused and angry. The CEO was giving his speech, and in it, he commended me for my good work in the company. He praised me for my talents and ability to reinvent and bring forth a new aspect to the magazine. The audience cheered very loudly for me and asked for a speech from me. Of course, I had to thank Frank for always being by my side and all the people who worked with me, without which the magazine wouldn't exist. I ended my speech by thanking the one person who did not believe in me and constantly put me down, because without their constant negativity, I would never have pushed myself to be better. When I walked off stage, everyone stopped me to talk to me, and I also got asked a lot of questions about who the unnamed hater was, but I kept that to myself. I made my way over to the table at which Idris, Heather, and Frank were seated. Frank gave me the tightest hug and congratulated me, and Idris got up to hug me too. Heather looked at me with anger. "Oh, Marilyn, sweetie, this is amazing. I definitely see why you wouldn't want to come to work with us." "Thanks, Idris, although I will admit that if you had sprung that offer around 6 months ago, I would have taken it." "You should have taken Idris up on his offer. At least then you'd get paid more," Frank said. "Paid more? Honey, I could never do that," Idris replied. "Right, she's not worth all that money," Frank continued. "No, I don't mean that. I mean that I could never match what she gets paid right now," Idris said. "What are you talking about? Do you want me to tell her, Marilyn?" Frank asked, surprised. "If I say it, it'll just sound braggy, so do me the honor, please. Marilyn makes at least 5 times more than I do in her current position here," Idris pronunciated. "What?" Heather amazed. "Yeah, she has way more money than either Frank or I could ever see in our lifetime." My mother-in-law protested. "That can't be possible. You must be wrong." "He's not wrong, Mom. I really did mean it when I thanked you, just so you know. You've been nothing short of a bully to me, and I hope that seeing me be way more successful than anyone in your family stings." "Oh, look, I have more important people to talk to. You'll have to excuse Frank and me, Idris," I uttered. "Feel free to come up to us whenever," Idris said. "Goodbye, Heather," I said to my mother-in-law. Idris laughed and raised his drink and cheers to me as Frank and I left a dumbfounded Heather at the table. I had never felt more alive and satisfied in my life. It truly was an amazing feat that I had accomplished, and I was proud of where I got. I'm also very grateful to Frank for always being supportive. Attending a wedding is a joyful occasion that marks a fresh beginning for a couple embarking on their journey together. Today, my husband and I found ourselves at my sister-in-law's wedding. To be honest, I wasn't too keen on going, but I decided to join in the celebration regardless. As the reception unfolded and course after course was served, I found myself unexpectedly handed a child's meal, while others around me savored sophisticated English cuisine. Confused, I sought clarification from the staff when my mother-in-law came over with a mischievous grin on her face. "Are you enjoying the wedding?" she asked, her gaze lingering on me. Before I could reply, my husband chimed in. "Let me introduce myself. I'm Marceline, freshly 29, and the proud owner of a unique clothing brand. My husband Mark is 3 years my senior. We tied the knot 4 years ago, having met at a department store where Mark once worked as a security guard. Despite the majority of guards being older, Mark, at 32, caught my eye with his youthful vigor and lean muscular build. After we married, I discovered his past as a firefighter, a career cut short by an injury. Our paths crossed often as I visited the store to pitch my products, and eventually, he invited me out for dinner. What started as a dinner date blossomed into a relationship leading us to marriage 1 year later. Life with Mark is filled with happiness, and arguments are rare. The challenge we face is our demanding careers, which leave us little time together, but I wouldn't change a thing. The only hiccup in our life together involves his family, particularly his older sister Janelle, who's 34 and quite the handful. One day when both Mark and I had managed to secure a day off together, we decided to make the most of it by going shopping, a rare treat given our busy schedules. I had been longing for a new pair of shoes, so the timing couldn't have been more perfect. Balancing time off is tricky for me as the owner of my own business. it naturally falls on me to prioritize the business needs over personal time, which means my opportunities for days off are few and far between. This responsibility often extends my workday well into the early hours, causing me to miss seeing my husband before he heads out for work. On this rare occasion when our schedules aligned for a date, an unexpected ring at our door at 8 a.m. disrupted our plans. "Who could that be at this time?" my husband mumbled as he went to answer the door. Amidst shouts of, "Hurry up and open up, it's your sister," he called out, and I joined him to see what was happening. There, standing at our doorstep, was my sister-in-law Janelle, complete with a suitcase. "Janelle, what are you doing here so early?" we both asked, utterly confused. With the utmost casualness, she announced, "I need to stay here for a bit." "Okay, wait, what do you mean?" we both asked, bewildered by her unexpected visit and request to stay without any prior notice. She explained nonchalantly that she was getting married soon, and our house was conveniently close to her wedding venue, making it easier for her venue inspections and dress fittings. "I just figured since you two live around here," she trailed off as she made her way inside. I protested that we finally had the day off and were on our way out. Her demeanor changed instantly. "Oh, you're going shopping? That sounds like fun." The excitement in her voice was evident, but my husband and I exchanged worried glances. "You're not thinking of joining us, are you?" I asked, trying to mask my disappointment. "Why not? Is there an issue with that?" she replied, her boldness leaving us speechless. Then, as if an afterthought, she added, "I need to check out some baby stuff. I want to make sure I'm prepared for everything." As she confidently took charge, suggesting we leave by 10 a.m., my husband's expression turned somber, a rare sight. It was clear he and Janelle had a history of clashing, dating back to their childhood squabbles. Attempting to salvage our day, I ventured, "Could you possibly leave us to enjoy our day off together?" Her response was a glare followed by a sharp, "What? You're trying to leave me because I don't come from a single mom family, right?" "Yes, I am from a single-parent family, but what does that have to do with anything?" I replied, trying to keep the peace yet stand my ground. In the midst of our confrontation, Janelle made a sweeping generalization about individuals from single-parent families, suggesting they were inherently judgmental and lacked empathy. Her words dripped with irony as she herself cast judgment from a high pedestal, embodying the very attitude she criticized. Janelle, who was raised by both parents, clung to this unfounded stereotype, sparking my anger. "That's a prejudiced viewpoint. I am not like that, and even Mark is clearly upset by your comments," I countered, noticing my husband's discomfort. Mark's gaze hardened as he faced his sister, who challenged him. "What's the matter, Mark? Got something to say for your sister?" His response was curt and decisive. "Yes, please leave." Janelle's parting shot was a veiled warning aimed particularly at me, but I brushed it off with a calm, "Thanks for the warning," and she stormed off. After she left, my husband and I tried to salvage the day with breakfast and a trip to the mall. Yet our attempt at a peaceful day was short-lived. We unexpectedly encountered Janelle again. "Look who it is," she remarked upon seeing us, and soon our mother-in-law joined, further straining the atmosphere. The encounter quickly soured when our mother-in-law critiqued the shopping bag from Infinity tread shoes that Mark was holding, mocking its lack of luxury compared to their high-end purchases. Their disdain was palpable, particularly aimed at me, insinuating that my influence was the root of Mark's misfortune. Frustrated by their superficial judgments, I couldn't help but ask, "Are you talking about me?" To which Janelle smugly implied they were, without directly answering. The situation escalated until Mark stepped in, expressing his disappointment in their materialistic values. "Enough, Mom. Your constant flaunting of wealth is both embarrassing and annoying," he stated, visibly upset by their behavior and the unnecessary tension it caused. It was a rare moment of anger from him, highlighting the strain his family's attitudes put on us both. I had always admired Mark's authoritative tone, a trait likely honed during his time as a security guard, yet it seemed to have little impact on his family members. Amidst a confrontation, his mother and sister questioned his contentment with me, labeling me as uneducated and poor. They argued that education was key to success, citing their father's high-ranking position in a major company as proof, and expressed disbelief that Mark, a university graduate from a prestigious institution, chose to be with someone like me. It felt like they saw me as an outsider, pushing their narrative aggressively. Despite Mark's attempts to defend me, their lack of empathy was staggering, making me question their moral compass. Their interrogation didn't stop there. They mockingly inquired about my earnings, only to laugh off my response with a disdainful comment about it being a challenging amount for a dropout. Mark's interjections were swiftly silenced, with Janelle mockingly wishing us good luck. Their insensitivity was blatant, showing no regard for our feelings as they carried on their one-sided conversation, insisting on our attendance at Janelle's upcoming lavish wedding. Feeling pressured by my mother-in-law's expectation that we couldn't possibly miss the event, I reluctantly agreed to attend, motivated solely by my commitment to Mark. If not for him, I would have never considered going to such an extravagant celebration. When the wedding day arrived, we made an effort, completing our work early and picking out a new dress for the occasion. The wedding was indeed a grand affair, hosted in a luxury hotel with an opulent ballroom, extravagant decorations, and an enormous wedding cake that screamed excess. Upon our arrival, my mother-in-law greeted us with evident pride and the lavishness she had orchestrated, boasting about the $140,000 spent, the 750 guests invited, and the gourmet meal prepared by a top chef. Her boasting was met with mild acknowledgement from others, but it was clear she looked down on anyone outside her social sphere, a trait that only elicited polite smiles and nods from the bystanders. This display of extravagance and the family's attitude toward us highlighted a clear disconnect, revealing a superficial valuation of wealth and status over genuine relationships and empathy. Despite the external grandeur, the day underscored the emotional and ethical chasm between us and them. I couldn't help but feel stunned by her blatant display of wealth. "Why didn't our wedding have such a grand budget?" my husband questioned, pointing out the stark difference between our modest $40,000 wedding and the current lavish event. Our wedding, though simple, was intimate, attended only by close relatives and friends, and it was perfect for us. Yet, the disparity in treatment couldn't be ignored, especially considering my husband is her own son. "My dear, it's because Janelle's fiancé Truett is set to play a significant role in the family business, especially once Dad becomes the president," my mother-in-law explained with a sense of pride, as if the extravagance was a necessity. Justified during this exchange, my father-in-law approached, signaling it was time for Janelle and Truett's grand entrance, suddenly ushering us to focus on the event. Yet his parting words to us were tinged with a superior tone, suggesting I should feel privileged to witness such opulence unlikely to be seen again in my lifetime. His calm demeanor did little to mask the disdain in his voice. Reacting to his father's veiled insult, my husband couldn't stay silent. "Why speak so dismissively, Dad?" To which his father coldly retorted, "I've never hidden my disapproval of your marriage. You know the conditions I set." This was news to me, the revelation that his father had conditions for our marriage that were apparently not met by me. Amidst this tense conversation, my mother-in-law diverted everyone's attention to Janelle, who was making a scene with her second dress change, drawing loud and unwanted attention. This diversion, while momentarily shifting the focus, couldn't disguise the underlying tensions. As we were left to digest the situation, my husband softly affirmed my worth. "Marceline is far more remarkable than you realize, Dad," even as his father walked away. This whole experience laid bare the superficial values of his family, contrasting sharply with the genuine love and respect we shared. Despite the opulence surrounding us, it was clear that our simple but sincere beginnings were our real treasure, untouched by the disdainful judgments of those who valued material wealth over personal integrity. Knowing my husband stood by me was a profound source of comfort. His unwavering support buoyed my spirits, especially in moments like these, underscoring the depth of our bond. As the bride and groom made their grand entrance, the hall burst into applause, setting the stage for the evening's lavish dinner. My sister-in-law took the moment to highlight the evening's culinary delights, promising a special course crafted by a renowned chef. Yet a nearby altercation between my mother-in-law and one of the servers hinted at a brewing scheme meant to target me. The distribution of meals to the many guests naturally took some time, and when my dish finally arrived, it was with disbelief that I found a child's meal set before me. My query to the server, met with evident discomfort, confirmed my suspicion of an intentional prank. The server, previously seen conversing with my mother-in-law, admitted to the deliberate act under her instruction. My astonishment drew my husband's attention, equally puzzled by the unusual choice of meal designated for me. The situation, more humiliating than surprising, attracted the unwanted gaze of nearby guests, amplifying the discomfort. My mother-in-law's subsequent taunt, linking the demeaning act to my background in education, escalated the tension. Her words tested the limits of my patience. Despite my reservations about causing a scene at my sister-in-law's wedding, the realization that the instigator of this mock was my mother-in-law herself diminished any obligation I felt to restrain my reaction. However, before I could respond, my husband intervened, his calm demeanor belying the anger in his voice. His rebuke of his mother's petty and immature actions reflected his disapproval of the disrespect shown not just to me, but to the decorum of the event itself. His stance in that moment underscored his integrity and the respect he held for our relationship, contrasting starkly with the childish antics orchestrated by his mother. Never before had I seen such a cold attitude toward my mother-in-law on my husband's part. His look was one of disdain, as though he viewed his opponent as less than worthy. His mother pretended not to understand the issue, but he pressed on, questioning the absurdity of serving an adult a child's meal, making it clear that such a choice was not one I would make. In response, my mother-in-law's face flushed with anger as she lashed out, criticizing my husband for marrying beneath their social standing and accusing him of abandoning their elite ways. Her words were steeped in the prejudice that affluence equates to superiority, a belief she seemed to champion zealously. I couldn't remain silent, addressing her directly. I acknowledged my dropout status, attributing it to the loss of my parents before I could finish my education. Yet I now held a position of significant responsibility as the president of a company. Her scoff at this revelation, dismissing the significance of my role, prompted me to reveal more, though reluctantly. Noting the pettiness of such discussions, I informed her that my business was a key supplier to Solar Burst Innovations, the company her husband was poised to lead, courtesy of its current president, Carmelo. Our company specialized in creating comfortable, wear-resistant clothing, initially focusing on t-shirts, before expanding our innovative fabric technology across all garment types. It was our socks, however, provided monthly to Carmelo's company, that stood as a testament to our successful partnership. Everything Carmelo wore was supplied by us, a professional relationship I had fostered directly. The revelation left my mother-in-law speechless, her arrogance deflated by the knowledge that I was not just a significant figure in my field, but also directly connected to someone she deemed important. The color drained from her face as she realized the implications of her actions, especially when I hinted at the potential impact on her husband's future within the company, should I choose to speak to Carmelo about her disparaging remarks. I then posed a question, suddenly reminding her of Carmelo's own educational background, which mirrored mine more than her elitist expectations. Would she want me to relay her views on education directly to him, considering he himself hadn't completed high school? This not only highlighted the hypocrisy in her stance, but also the precariousness of her family's position should their prejudices come to light. When I calmly stated the potential repercussions of their actions, my mother-in-law's confidence shattered, and she started begging me not to tell him anything. It was a classic display of how quickly those who wield their power unjustly crumble when faced with a genuine threat to their status. My father-in-law, drawn by the escalating situation, received the same firm message from me. The possibility of advising Carmelo against his presidency struck a chord of panic, questioning their integrity and pride. As I stood resolute against their coercion, the commotion caught the attention of everyone around, halting the progression of our table amidst the unfolding drama. Janelle, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, ventured to inquire about the commotion. Seizing the moment, I informed her of my annual income and the stability of my business, addressing her previous dismissive interruption with a fact she couldn't ignore. Her reaction was palpable, a mixture of shock and disbelief, rendering her momentarily speechless. The tables had turned. The in-laws, once towering figures of disdain, appeared deflated, their arrogance sucked away by the revelation of their misjudgments and the imminent consequences of their actions. My mother-in-law, in a dramatic shift of demeanor, resorted to kneeling and begging for forgiveness, a spectacle that begged the question of her pride. Yet the sincerity of their remorse was questionable. My refusal to immediately forgive was met with pleas of financial desperation, highlighting their precarious situation exacerbated by extravagant spending on the wedding. My father-in-law's admission of his financial imprudence, especially for the sake of the wedding, painted a picture of misplaced priorities and dependency on unearned wealth. Janelle's reaction to her newfound predicament was telling. Her concerns were self-centered, mourning the loss of her privileged position rather than acknowledging the broader implications of her family's actions. Her indignation at the suggestion of her dependence on parental support for the honeymoon underscored the entitlement that had led to this moment of reckoning. The entire ordeal laid bare the in-laws' superficial values, contrasting starkly with the genuine merit and self-made success I represented. Their pleas for forgiveness, while dramatic, were a testament to the deep-seated issues of entitlement and the consequences of their unchecked prejudices. I pointed out that genuinely affluent individuals and famous people don't feel the need to boast about their wealth or status, implying that their excessive bragging only highlighted their lack of authenticity. You're all masquerading as something you're not. It's time to face reality, I told them. My words seemed to pierce deeply, leaving them visibly shaken, while my husband quietly expressed his admiration for my stance. Following this revelation, the wedding lost all semblance of joy, leaving us with unexpected free time as we departed the dismal scene of my sister-in-law's supposed celebration. Later, I had a candid conversation with Carmelo about the situation. He agreed that making Charles president under these circumstances would be inappropriate, considering the disrespect shown towards me. Carmelo humorously suggested a fantastic solution. A transfer for my father-in-law to a foreign branch. When my father-in-law heard of the proposed transfer to the United Kingdom, he was desperate for us to intervene, fearing the implications of such a move. However, Carmelo's decision stood firm, leading to my father-in-law's resignation from the company amidst this chaos. The fallout from these events was significant. The wedding fiasco and the loss of the expected position in the company caused my sister-in-law's fiancé, who had relocated from Switzerland to Canada for the wedding, to find himself entangled in an unexpected drama. The culmination of these events led to the cancellation of their marriage, leaving my sister-in-law in a state of shock so severe it necessitated hospitalization. The domino effect of their actions didn't stop there. The combined stress of my father-in-law's career upheaval and my sister-in-law's emotional distress caused my mother-in-law to lose all her hair, aging her considerably. My husband remarked on the irony of how quickly the fortunes of those who once looked down on others had deteriorated. What they thought was a life of glittering diamonds turned out to be no more than a facade crumbling under the weight of a single pivotal event. This situation served as a stark reminder of how life's trajectory can dramatically change based on our actions and decisions, for better or worse. This was a lesson learned in the hardest way by my in-laws, a testament to the unpredictable nature of fate. As for us, we've decided to use our savings to start building our dream home together. While my in-laws faced challenges, my business continued to thrive, increasing its profits significantly. In the midst of these developments, we received joyous news. I was expecting. With our financial security and our family growing, we probably appear quite fortunate, almost like celebrities from the perspective of my in-laws now. Yet amidst this success and happiness, I've made a vow to myself and to our future. I'm determined to live a joyful life with my husband and our soon-to-arrive child, always remembering to stay humble and grounded, no matter the prosperity or acclaim that comes our way. This commitment to humility and happiness, regardless of our circumstances, is a promise I intend to keep as we embark on this exciting new chapter of our lives together.